Welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by yarnspirations.com. In this video, I get to show you one of my very own designs, and it is super fast, super cute. I know you're gonna love it. This is the It's So Sweet hat. Isn't it adorable? You'll notice that the spelling of sweet is S-U-I-T-E, and that's because this colorway, this sort of lighter blue, is called Sweet. And this entire hat is made only using one ball of yarn. That's right. Chic Sheep by Marley Bird is the yarn we used for this particular pattern. It's 100% washable merino wool. Along with the yarn, you need a pair of size 7 16-inch circular needles, a pair of size 8 16-inch circular needles, a stitch marker, a tapestry needle, and a good pair of scissors. You can find a full list of the materials in the pattern, which is free at yarnspirations.com. I'll put a link to the pattern in the video description box right down there, and while you're down there, please smash that like button, as my kids say. Get your pattern, gather your materials, join me back here, and I will teach you everything you need to know to create this super fun and fast quick knit hat. As I mentioned, this hat is very fast and it's easily constructed. We will start right down here with the brim of the hat using a twisted rib stitch. And we will work on this twisted rib with the smaller size of our needles. Then we will switch to our larger size needles and jump to this very subtle chevron pattern, which is created by using knits and purls in each round. So let's start off with the ribbing, and then we'll jump into how you will read a chart to follow along with the instructions up here. And last but not least, because there's no shaping at the top of the hat, we'll talk about what you can do to seam the top of the hat. And of course, the pom-poms are purely optional, all right? So let me go ahead, grab my yarn, and get you started with the cast on and the twisted ribbed brim. There. I'm gonna grab the smaller of my two needles here. We wanna make the brim on the smaller needle, and I've placed my slip knot directly onto that needle. Now I'm gonna go ahead and cast on a total of 90 stitches using the long tail cast on. Now, I am going to mention something here just for those of you who are in the video. If you find that you like the brim of your hat to be a little bit more snug, you could cast on fewer stitches and then on the first round increase to the number of stitches you need for the body of the hat, should you choose to do that. It's totally up to you. But I found for the one size fits most adults, the 90 stitches with the twisted rib brim and the smaller size needles, it fits really nicely on the head. It's not too tight, but it's not super loose. It's like a good in between, because this hat is meant to be a little bit more floppy than like a fitted beanie, okay? So you want to get all 90 stitches cast onto your circular needle here. Once you get all 90 stitches cast onto your needles, go ahead and grasp the other end of your needle. I like the long tail cast on because I can easily see the ridges right there, or that nice ridge that I've created, and I can make sure that I don't have anything twisted, and all of that is to the inside of my needle here. Now what I need to do is jump in to my 1x1 twisted rib. So what I like to do is I will grab my stitch marker and place it directly onto my right hand needle. Now I jump into the stitch pattern. Typically we would jump into a knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one, and we would knit one just like so. But when we knit through the back leg, you literally will go into the back leg of the stitch and knit and have it jump off. Bring your yarn between your needles, purl the next stitch, bring the yarn between your needles back to the back, go through the back leg, and knit. Between the needles, purl, between the needles, through the back leg, and knit. Okay? I'm going to show you with the yarn in my other hand. Not very good at purling with this hand, but bear with me. Between the needles, and purl, between the needles, through the back leg, and knit. Between the needles, purl, between the needles, through the back leg, and knit. You won't be able to tell much of a difference of what's going on here on the first round. It really starts to show up once you get to the second round and subsequent stitches. Let me show you a little piece that I've been working on with twisted stitches so you can see what I mean. Here is another hat that I have started, and I've got some twisted rib happening here. And can you tell from the bottom of those knit stitches that at the V point, the one side and the other side, they look like they're crossing their legs, okay? That is what a twisted stitch is. Twisted stitches tend to be a little bit more snug than a normal knit stitch, which is one of the reasons I really like the way it looks on a ribbed brim of a hat. But when you're going along here, we do not transition to a normal knit stitch, and quote unquote normal, until we actually get to the body of the hat. So even as I'm working along with these stitches, I'm still continuing to knit through the back leg and continue my work. Okay, does this make sense here? And like I said, it gives us this really nice twisted look at the bottom of the hat. I really like the way that looks. Once you finish the first round of your ribbing, you will then continue on in that knit through the back leg, purl one for 5 more rounds, for a total of 6 rounds for the brim of your hat. Now, if you want to add more rounds than 6, you can do that, totally up to you. I don't think you'll run out of yarn. I still think you'll be within your 1 ball of yarn requirement for this hat, should you choose to do that. Once the brim is done, it's then time to transfer over to larger needles, and then we need to increase our stitches just a little bit to make sure that the body of the hat has the correct number of stitches for our stitch pattern. To change over to larger set of needles, it's really easy. You don't need to do any extra work as far as slipping stitches over. You're simply going to grab your larger needle that you want to work onto. And when it's time, see, I've moved my marker here. When it's time to go over here, I'm just going to knit this round, and I will knit it directly onto my new needle. Okay, can you see how this works? The old needle is just hanging out there. I actually could remove that marker so it doesn't fall off right now, and then I'll add it back in when I get to the end of the round. But you transfer all of these over simply by knitting them onto the larger needle, okay? No extra work here needs to be done. You'll also notice that I am knitting through the front leg of all the stitches. I'm no longer knitting through the back leg. So this is where you will just knit through the front leg on all of the stitches. When you come to the end of the round, you will notice that your smaller needle is now empty, so you can set it aside. And all of your stitches are now on your larger needle, so you can grab your stitch marker and place it on there. So we have just worked that knit round. Now that we've worked our 1 knit round and changed to our larger needle, it's time for us to work 1 full round with some make ones. Our ultimate goal on this next round is to increase our stitch count by 6 stitches. We need those 6 stitches to give us the correct stitch count for the body of the hat and the stitch pattern we are using. We will do make ones to work these increases. So we begin by knitting 15. (13, 14, 15), and now we do a make one. You see that strand right there? It's connected to the stitch that is on my left-hand needle and the stitch I just knit off of my left-hand needle. If I take my left-hand needle and I go from front to back and scoop up that bar, I now have that bar resting on my left-hand needle. I want to knit through the back leg of that bar because I want this to be twisted. Sometimes I'll go from the front and swivel around to get to the back. Let me show you how to do that. So I'll go to the front and I'll swivel it around to be able to get to the back. And then I just knit that bar you picked up. I now have an increase. Then you will knit 15 and repeat. Here we go. I want to pick up that bar, so I go from front to back, pick up that bar. Then I want to knit it through the back leg and off. The reason I chose to do the make one increase instead of the knit front and back is because it does not leave that bar that the knit front and back does, that purl bump. So that's why I did the make one. And if you do it the way I just showed you, it will be invisible and you will now have 96 stitches on your needles. Once you have those 96 stitches, it's time to jump in to the stitch pattern for the body of the hat. It's really easy and you can follow along with either the written instructions or the chart. As long as you know how to knit and purl, you can do the body of the hat. Once you have finished all of your increases, it's now time to work the chevron pattern. Now, this is the pattern you are looking at, and then here is the hat example. Can you see this nice sort of embossed chevron happening right here with the pearls? Those are represented right here in the instructions by those dashes. So if you are following along with this chart, hopefully you can see it here, you will start reading the chart right here at number 1, and that dash represents a purl. So you would purl 1, and then you would knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you'd purl 1, and you would knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and continue on all the way around. When you get back to the start, you'd move your marker, and you would go to row 2, purl 1, knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, purl 1, knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so on and so forth. Can you see how that works out? It's really easy to follow along if you remember that the dashes are purls and the plain boxes, those are your knits. So when you get to round 3, it's purl, purl, and then knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, purl 1, purl, purl, knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, purl 1, so on and so forth. And you continue this for the entire pattern. The hardest part to me is remembering what row you are on. So I highly recommend keeping a post-it note with you so you can make a tick mark every time you finish a row, or use any sort of device that allows you to count your stitches, or you could use a nifty little row counter that you can put onto your work, and it acts as a stitch marker and a row counter at once. I'll show you how this works as we go along. They're really easy and I can show you how to make them. I'll make sure that there's a link in the video description box so you can see how to make the row counter. But overall, it's actually very easy. You just have to remember what row you are on so that way you know when you're supposed to purl, and it will give you that really cool embossed look. If the chart isn't for you, that's okay. We've also written out the instructions row for row as well. You can see over here that we do have the chevron pattern written instructions all there for you. So you can follow rows 1 through 16, which is the same that we have over here. 1 through 16, that's right up there above that 15. And you would do that until the piece measures about 8 inches. Whoop, that's page 1. So until it measures about 8 inches, okay? And you do want to make sure you end on a 16th round. The reason you want to make sure you end after around 16 is because you want to make sure that you get the full chevron stitch happening by the time you get to the top of the hat. So for me, as I was working on the hat, every time I finished around 16, I would measure the hat and make a decision. Do I want to do another full set of 16 rounds? Is it too big? Is it too small? Kind of where am I? And so I suggest you do the same thing. You'll be just fine working along. Mine measures 8 inches to the very top. Now the great thing here is once you get your 8 inches, that's it. Then you just seam the top of the hat together. There's no extra shaping on this hat. I wanted to make sure this hat was something simple enough that you don't have to remember where you were in any sort of decrease, but interesting enough that it gave you a stitch pattern that wasn't just all stockinette or just all garter stitch, which is why I did sort of the embossed chevron pattern. It's really quite easy. Now I'm assuming because you did the ribbing, you know how to knit and purl, so I shouldn't have to show you how to do that. And now that I've explained how you read the chart, you should be pretty good to go on that as well. One thing I do want to show you is how you could use one of those row counters if that's something you're interested in doing, because it will help you keep track of the rows you're on and you won't get off the mark. So let me show you how I use the row counter. I'm ready to begin my chevron pattern here and I have my marker in place. So what I will do is I'll remove that marker and I'll take my row counter here and I will place it on my needle starting at number 1. Then every time I come around and it's time for me to change positions, I will move the marker down. So now it's on number 2. Now it's on number 3. Now it's on number 4, so on and so forth. When I get to number 10, so say I'm all the way down here to number 10, and you're like, Marley, wait a second. How do I know I am going further? Because there are 16 rows in this. Well, you can take this handy little removable marker here and we will place it right up here on the number 1, and that will let you know that you've already completed 1 full round. So now when I put this back up on the number 1, I know it's number 1 plus 10. And now it's number 2 plus 10, number 3 plus 10, so on and so forth. You see how that works? So I know that when I would get to the 6, that's when I would be to the end of my repeat completely, and I would start all over. So I would remove this dangle marker because I wouldn't have that 10 done yet, right? And I'd place it back on there. I could place this one back down here just to keep it so I don't lose it. Maybe. There we go. And I would start again. These row or round counters can be very helpful, especially when you're working with a stitch pattern that requires so many rounds to complete the repeat. And just because I do have this here, remember the first stitch of this round would be purl 1, and then you would knit 7. And then purl 1, and then knit 7. When you've reached the 8 inches on the body of your hat, that portion is complete. You'll notice in the instructions it says then to cast off and then seam the top of the hat together, which you could do. You would simply just bind off your stitches and then whip stitch them together, or if you wanted to do a mattress stitch, you could do that too. But in the video, I want to show you that you could also use a Kitchener stitch to really make it look seamless. At the top of this hat, you can see here, there is a really beautiful join right there at the top, and that's because it was Kitchener stitched together, okay? So here's what you would do. We're gonna use our imagination here for a little bit, okay? Let's imagine that this is our project and the hat is all complete and we have all of our stitches on this one needle. We know we have 96 stitches, so we could divide that in 2 and take half the number of stitches and place them on one needle and half the number of stitches on a second needle. Now, could I just do this where you kind of pull out that back half of the cable? Can you see? It's probably hard to see with the blue here. Can you see if I pull out that back half of the cable, that puts half the stitches on one needle and half the stitches on another? Can you see that? You could go that route, or you already have a second needle. You could just take your second needle and slip those stitches, half the number of stitches, onto that second needle, just so that way you had two separate needles going on, okay? If you did that, your work would look a little something like this. I've already worked up a little swatch here. Okay, that has to be a little bit better. All I'm gonna do right now is thread my tapestry needle with my tail, and I'm holding my work up. Now, again, imagine these two bits here that are hanging from my needle, that's the body of my hat. So it's like I have my hat here, and these are just the two sides of my hat. Can you see that? There's just the two sides of my hat, okay? All I want to do is, with the yarn coming from my front needle, whatever one's closest to me, I'm going to start off by going into this one as if to purl, and I will go into this one as if to knit. Now I've prepped my work. I now will go into this one as if to knit and take it off. Go into the next one on my front needle as if to purl and leave it on. Go back to my back needle, go into this first one as if to purl and take it off. Go into the next one as if to knit and leave it on. Coming back up here to the front, go into the first one as if to knit and take it off. Go into the next one as if to purl and leave it on. Move to the back, go in as if to purl. That one comes off. Go in as if to knit and leave that one on. Okay, what you are doing here is you're joining the two halves of your hat together with essentially a knit stitch. So right up here, we'll go in as if to knit, take it off, go in as if to purl and leave it on, go in as if to purl and take it off, go in as if to knit and leave it on. And you just continue doing this until all of the stitches are finished off. And when, careful, you don't do that. Don't let your string go over the top. When it's all done, you will have grafted or Kitchener stitched your piece together, and it will look very nice at the top. Now, as I mentioned, you don't have to do this, okay? In the instructions, I even wrote down that you could just bind off all your stitches and then sew it together. That makes the piece a very easy piece to follow, right? It makes it so that you don't have to learn any sort of extras like the Kitchener stitch. You just have to know how to bind off and then just whip stitch those pieces together. Pretty simple stuff. But if you just want to go that little extra mile here, by doing the Kitchener stitch, see how pretty that is? It just brings the two pieces together nice and neat, and you get a really nice join. You would do that all the way down. At the very end, you just finish off and weave in your ends, and that's all you have to do for this hat. Now, I know that this video, like, there's not a whole lot of hands-on sort of instructions because there's not a whole lot to do. Like, we learned to cast on, we learned how to do the through the back loop twisted rib brim. We learned how to read the charts, that way we know when to put our knits and our purls. We learned something new, how to use that row counter, and now you know how to do the Kitchener stitch should you choose to do that for the top of your hat. It's really quite easy. This hat is only one ball of yarn. It's really simple to make, and it's fun for guys and girls. If you wanted to make it for little kids, you'd have to shrink down the pattern some because it is a little bit too big for little kids. But for those of us who are adults, should I try it on? I always try on the hats. Let's see here. Here's the hat. This is what it looks like. It is just a fun little hat. Now, I love the little pom-poms. Like, I had extra yarn. We were like, oh, let's add pom-poms because it's fun. but it's just a different little hat. It's different, right? It's different. You can see when I talked about it being just a little bit loose around my head. Loose is probably the wrong word. It's not like super snug, but it's not going to fall down on my face. It actually feels really good. And the top of the hat, you can see, it just looks like just like that. It just falls down. It's just real comfortable. I think this hat is awesome, and it's something different. And if you're just in like a hat rut where you're doing the same old hat all the time, change it up and make the It's So Sweet hat. You won't be disappointed. I would love to know what color you are making your hat. Make sure you share with me on social media. Use hashtag MarleyBird because I would love to be able to come by and smash your like button. I'm Marley Bird. This is the Marley Bird YouTube channel, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Bye, everybody. Hey, thanks for joining me today on the channel. If you want more videos just like that one, check out some of these other videos that I've already handpicked for you. Don't forget to hit subscribe so that way you're up to date whenever I release a new video. And don't forget, smash that like button, as my kids say. Bye, guys.